just a second when the lights come up. See, there we go. All right. Awesome. So glad to see all of you. Thank you for being here this morning. My name is Joe. I'm the lead pastor here. And if I've not met you, I'd love to do that this morning. I'll be outside these doors right out here. Come by and introduce yourself. That would be wonderful. Also want to welcome those who are watching by live stream as well. Thank you for joining us this morning. Whether you're watching it live or playing it back later, we just want to say thank you for sharing your time out of your busy schedule in this time of worship together. And I will give you a word real quick for those of you that are at home. We're going to be spending a little extra extensive time in the scriptures this morning, reading them together. So if you want to scramble and find a copy of the scriptures, either in print or electronically, you're going to want to be able to do that at a point in the message this morning. And we've made copies of the scriptures available for you in the door if you don't have a printed copy or an electronic version with you today. No problem. Just go back and pick one of those up because you're going to be glad that you did that in a few minutes, all right? Because you're going to want your own copy for what we're going to do. And by the way, if you pick one up and you don't have one at home, just take it with you. That way you'll have one at home, okay? That'd be great. So several years ago, Valerie and I we're excited about a new mall that was opening in Austin, Texas, where we lived, and we couldn't wait to get there on opening weekend. We did that, and throngs of people were there, and we all gathered around the directory board of that mall, and there was mass confusion because they had put all this wonderful map up and directory of all the stores, but they had forgotten one very important element of the map. They had left off the star or the arrow that says you are here. So nobody had any idea of where we were in the mall. In fact, before it was over with, I think somebody took a marker out and just wrote it on the plexiglass right there in front of the deal. We were complete confusion, complete disorientation. Maybe you somewhat feel like that right now in your life. You're wondering, where are you? I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on. There's things going on in my life today that I'm disoriented about. I'm confused about that. Well, we want to encourage you, first of all, that is completely normal. We all go through that from time to time. And if anybody tells you they've never gone through that, they have other issues like lying and things like that, okay? So we want to encourage you to understand that sort of thing is normal. In fact, we're going to spend the next 6 weeks in the Psalms because we think that what David did in the Psalms, he was the major writer of the Psalms, not the only writer, but the major writer of the Psalms. What David did is this collection of the highs and lows of human life. When you read through the Psalms, you hear every emotion on the spectrum that we humans experience. And David he's that guy in the room that says out loud what everybody's thinking. And so as he expresses the Psalms, all these things come out. And so we're going to be looking at a sampling of 6 Psalms in the next 6 weeks in this series called You Are Here. And we'll understand that there's this range of emotion from the highest highs and the lowest lows and everywhere in between. Last night in Austin, George Strait, the king of country and western, and Willie Nelson got on stage together, and they sang all these songs, and all the library of country and western music does not have the saga that the Psalms have that David wrote. And so we're going to see that over the next several weeks, and we hope that it will encourage you. Now this morning, what we're going to do is we're going to start in one particular psalm, Psalm 145. If you want to go ahead and be opening a copy of God's Word to Psalm 145, we're going to look at that in a minute. And what we're going to do is we're going to see that this psalm is David's kind of overarching psalm of our context. Our global context, in that no matter what is happening in our individual, specific, personal, temporary circumstances, there is a larger, overarching, global context we all live in, and that is God's love and compassion and mercy that is completely and totally reliable. So what David did when he wrote this particular psalm is that he took all the angst, all the anger, and all the hope, and all the encouragement that he was experiencing in his day-to-day life, And he wrote this psalm as an overarching context to cover it all and say that in the end, no matter what is going on in the day-to-day, God's love is steadfast. I can rely on that. Let's read the Psalm 145 together. Now again, we're going to do something a little different this morning. Usually what happens is we read a few verses, then we kind of break that down for you, and we explain some Greek or Hebrew, and we take a little phrase by phrase or verse by verse or something like that. We're not going to do that today. We're going to give you a break from that sort of thing today, and we're just going to read through the entire psalm more than once. So I hope you're ready for that. Psalm 145. I will exalt you, my God, the King. I will praise your name forever and ever. Every day I will praise you. Oh, I'm just going to read this out loud. You just listen, okay? All right, some of you are reading with me. I'm reading one particular translation. If you don't have that one particular translation, it won't work, okay? So you just listen as I read, all right? Let me start over. I'm going to be reading from the New International Version, by the way, because that's what all those free Bibles that we have out there for you to take home if you don't have one, they're in that translation. So I thought, well, we'll make it easy. We'll do the NIV today. All right, great. I will exalt you, my God, the King. I will praise your name forever and ever. Every day I will praise you and extol your name forever and ever. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. One generation commends your works to another. They tell of your mighty acts. They speak of the glorious splendor of your majesty. And I too will meditate on your wonderful works. They tell of the power of your awesome works. And I will proclaim your great deeds. They celebrate your abundant goodness and joyfully sing of your righteousness. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love. The Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all he has made. All your works praise you, Lord. Your faithful people extol you. They tell of the glory of your kingdom and speak of your might, so that all people may know of your mighty acts. And the glorious splendor of your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion endures through all generations. The Lord is trustworthy in all he promises, and faithful in all he does. The Lord upholds all who fall and lifts up all who are bowed down. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food at the proper time. You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing. The Lord is righteous in all his ways and faithful in all he does. The Lord is near to all who call on him, in truth. He fulfills the desires of those who fear him. He hears their cry and saves them. The Lord watches over all who love him, but all the wicked he will destroy. My mouth will speak in praise of the Lord. Let every creature praise his holy name forever and ever. The word of the Lord. Reading this psalm reminds me of one of the very first times I flew in an airplane. I was in my late teenage years flying by myself from Corpus Christi to Dallas, and then from Dallas to Minneapolis, Minnesota. So we left the airport in Corpus. It was a little thunder bumpy, a little bit. You know, on the coast, they always have some rain showers. And this was June, so it was no different, of course. And then when we got to Dallas, there was a major rainstorm. It was just flooding everywhere. It was raining. I think it was the very first time I really understood the term, it was raining farm animals. It was raining. And there was some thunder and lightning involved, so we were delayed a little bit. Then the thunder and lightning left, but then it was still raining. And so we took off in the rain. And I mean, I wasn't sure. It's one of the very first times I was ever on an airplane, so I was a little bit unsure of it. I suffer from travel sickness, so I'm motion sickness, so I was a little worried about that. We were thunder bumping around, bouncing around in that airplane, and we were taking off, and we were flying about 5 minutes into the flight. We finally broke through the clouds, and the sun flooded the interior of that plane. And when it did, everybody, including the flight attendants, applauded and cheered for the sunshine that we were out through the clouds. And for me, it was a very surreal moment because, truthfully, I had forgotten that the sun had been shining all along. I just had to get it above the clouds to be able to see it. When I read Psalm 145 in context of all the other stuff that David has written in the Psalms, I think about that flight that day where the sunshine of the Lord's love just comes beaming in to the reality of day-to-day life and floods the interior of our cabin of life because it finally breaks through all of the clouds. That's what David was doing here. This is his applause and cheering psalm that he offers us as the overarching global context of God's steadfast love. You know, in our day and time, there's not much that is dependable. Not much is reliable. The only thing you can really rely on today is the fact that things are going to be unreliable. But God, His love, His compassion, His mercy is absolutely, completely reliable. I want to read this psalm again, but I want to read it in silence and ask you to read it yourself. I want to ask you to read through Psalm 145, and we're going to give you plenty of time to do that. I'm not particularly a quick reader anyway to start with. I retain about 99% of what I read, but one of the reasons is because I'm not a very fast reader. I even took a speed reading course one time and couldn't keep up with the course. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. Are you laughing at me or with me? I just need to know what's going on here. Let's read through Psalm 145 in silence. Just take your time, read through the psalm, please. I'm wondering what that experience was like for you. I have read through the entire Bible, as many of you have. I've done it more than once. I have a very close friend who this year will read through the Bible, Genesis through Revelation, in 1 year for the 32nd year in a row he's done that. It's impressive, right? But I've discovered something recently in my own journey with the Lord, and that is the value of slowing down, and rather than focused on getting to the completion and check what I was supposed to read that day, instead, just reading slowly through the Scriptures. Out loud in the voice I think maybe the Lord would be using to say those things that I'm reading. And so I want to encourage you to practice kind of what we're doing today. It's why I'm asking you to do it with me, to kind of give you a little bit of practice time to maybe do some of that this week. Because I think what happens is we realize the calming presence of God's love in our life when we do that. This is a psalm of calming presence. David is able to rise above the circumstances and the fray of day-to-day life and write praise to God because of the steadfast love and compassion and mercy that sustains him. He understands it to be his calming presence. The love of his God is his calming presence. If there's anything in our life that we rely on to calm us, other than the presence of God himself and his love, sooner or later we will find that that substance or that food or that activity or that TV show or that other book will fail in its dependability. But God's love is steadfast. It's dependable. As I share this morning in the room, and those who are watching online, I wonder who's watching. I wonder who is going through what right now in your life. I wonder what you're experiencing. Maybe you're one of those folks that at the very beginning, as we talked about orientation and disorientation and reorientation, the whole work of the book of Psalms does that, where David is rightly oriented, then he's disoriented, then God brings him to reorientation. And there's a cycle that we go through as human beings over and over again, even as followers of God. In fact, the hope that we have in God is that there's always the reorientation to that which is right and good. Whereas the rest of the world just stays in orientation and disorientation. They have no hope of the reorientation that God provides through his Son, Jesus Christ. I wonder where you are right now, what part of the cycle that you're in. I wonder maybe if you are among those who are disoriented right now. You're kind of tired of this particular ride. You don't know where God is going, and you're kind of saying, God, I think maybe I won't off this ride. Valerie and my kids have the right to have me pull over anytime I'm driving and request that they get out and go on their own and walk and get there quicker, especially if they've discovered that I am on one of Pops' shortcuts. I have this notorious thing about me that if I mention shortcut, it's probably going to end up being, I'm that guy. It's going to end up being 10 times as long. We were going somewhere downtown just looking for a new spot we hadn't been to as a family, Easter weekend, and I heard from the back seat, Dad, is this one of your shortcuts? Because we couldn't find the place. Maybe you're going through something right now that feels like to you something that is disorienting, and you're kind of, God, I'm not sure about where you're headed. I don't think I like this ride anymore. I wonder, I really, truly, deeply wonder if God didn't have David write this psalm for you. For you. I really wonder that. Now, maybe you're in that state of reorientation or everything's fine. You're not going through anything right now. Everything you'd say is just, well, I'm good. I don't know about you else. I'm fine. Well, I wonder how honest you're being, first of all. And secondly, even if you are being honest, we go through those cycles. So I wonder if you might not let Psalm 145 really soak in deeply so that the next time something happens that's jarring or disorienting or even dark in your life, you will have this to lean on. You will have this to experience, to be reminded that the only thing that truly is dependable is the unchanging, constant, steadfast love of God. In fact, you may be thinking about, well, I know somebody that is, and I hope they're listening today, or I wish they were here today, or I think I'll send them a note about, hey, read Psalm 145. It'll help you. Can I offer an alternative strategy for you? That you instead just let Psalm 145 soak in deep in your life, so that when that next bump comes your way, they won't need to hear about a calming presence. They will observe the calming presence of God in your life. Hey, I want to encourage you. We've spent a little extra time in the scriptures today. I wonder if this week you might not just sit with this psalm for a little bit. Hang out with it. We give you a reading guide, and it's through the Gospel of Matthew right now. It's just a couple of chapters a week. But I wonder if you might just spend a little extra time in this psalm this week. Just read it and reread it. Maybe even memorize it. Maybe memorize Psalm 145. Maybe write your own version of it. Now, I didn't get into this real detail-wise, but let me tell you what David did with this psalm. What's so amazing about this psalm at so many levels is what he did is he took the Hebrew alphabet, and starting with the very first letter of the alphabet all the way through the end, he started the first line with the first letter, second line with the second letter, and successively on through. So he did the Hebrew ABCs in each line of this psalm. Maybe you don't have to know Hebrew. Maybe you would take the English alphabet and write your own Psalm 145 with the successive letter for each beginning of line. Or not just a line, but a word or a phrase that identifies something awesome you think about God. Oh, there's your A right there, okay? There you go, got you started, all right? Psalm 145, okay? Maybe this week you would actually find a very high spot somewhere. I know we live in Texas, it's pretty flat, but maybe you would kind of find a spot where you could get up above where you normally do life down in the street level, and you'd get up and be able to see kind of over that and get a better, higher perspective. And it reminds you that this Psalm 145 reminds us that the overarching global high perspective view is that God's love is steadfast. Maybe you would find someone this week who is suffering, hurting, they're ill, they're lonely, and you would go and simply sit with them. Not focused about what you're going to say. Not even thinking, I'll take Psalm 145 to them, read them that. Not even that. Just sit with them and be present with them and be the calming presence of God with skin in their midst. Would you bow your heads, close your eyes, and take 30 seconds to hear the Spirit of God speak to you about what you should take away from this message today? 30 seconds. Now, with your head still bowed, your eyes closed, let me pray this over you this morning. Listen to the word that God has spoken. Listen to the one who is close at hand. Listen to the voice who began creation. Listen even if you don't understand. Listen, listen, listen. Father in heaven, give us the ears to hear. Help us listen. In the name of Christ,